Hi everyone, good morning. This is Deborah. Welcome to my channel. A little bit of background. I've been on YouTube almost as long as Trisha Paytas. And I'm 65 years old. And I am single. I have a feeling it's going to be that way. Believe me, it's not for lack of trying. I've been on many dates and they've been hilarious. I think it's kept my channel running. All of my adventures with these guys. I call them little boys. Yeah, little boys. I think during my divorce, I already knew that my husband had a woman living with him, so I went ahead and started dating. That guy would reprimand and discipline me if I said a bad word. And I don't normally talk. I don't normally say bad words, but he would reprimand me for 10 minutes. I've always told my children and my grandchildren, it's okay to say a bad word if it adds accentuation to the topic. That's what I would tell them. No, he would reprimand me. He would tell me how to do my makeup, what to wear, and I never had a say in anything I wanted to do. It was always about him. He was an extreme narcissist. So then I went on Match and POF and dated. They never lasted more than maybe two dates or 3 dates, and then all of their weirdness would come out. Believe me. I never got myself, thank God, in too many bad situations because of my training as a police officer. Yeah, so I'm lucky that way. Yeah, so this morning I woke up with a raging migraine and I'm thinking, do I call in? What the hell do I do? So I've tried all morning to get rid of it. So I haven't been sleeping well. I cry myself to sleep, and I think it's because of the isolation, the virus, and the fact that I'm missing my sister and my parents who are no longer on this planet. And I have this extreme guilt, even though I know that I did as much as I could for my parents, but I could have done more. I did a lot for my sister. She was an RN and she had, renal disease and diabetes, and she was on dialysis. I just wish I had done more, and this guilt is just eating me alive. So if your parents are still alive and your siblings, do more than what you're doing now, people. Yeah, do more. I used to complain a lot about my mom and stuff, and after being on this planet for 65 years, I realized I had wonderful parents. I had a great childhood. Yes, I did. My father had a really good job. He made really good money, but he may not have always brought it all home to my mom, if you know what I mean. So he helped build Fairfax County in its infancy in the 60s. He was there during the building boom. Yeah. But when we were growing up, I think our first home was in, I think, some little street in Fairfax, I guess near Guinea Road, I'm thinking. Then we moved to Arlington. And my father was 6'4.5". And I remember as a little girl walking behind him on the streets of Arlington. We lived right in the heart of it. I do remember that because we just walked to a Christmas tree place, and I remember walking behind him, and he had the whole tree over his shoulder. He was striking. He made Elvis and Rock Hudson look ugly, people. Oh my God. And then we moved to Winchester, and we lived on a 300-acre farm. This was before electricity, people. This was before indoor plumbing. We had none. In order to take a bath, we had to go pump the water, or I did, out of the well, because I was the oldest of, well, at that time it was only 3. And then my mother would have to boil it on a wood stove. And then she'd put the hot water in the galvanized tub. And I remember having to share this with my sister, who was 2 years younger than me. And to this day, it kind of gives me a little creepy feeling about that. But that's the way you did it back then. Let's see. And then my mother had, after 3 tries, she, when I was, I guess, 2nd grade, she had a baby boy. And his nickname was Prince Greg, because my parents wanted a boy so bad. Well, they got it. I will continue a little bit more of this, I guess tomorrow or whatever. Yeah, about my guilt. Because when someone is gone, you can't do any more for them. You may be able to do more, something for their offspring or whatever. But, I'm sorry, guys, I always get off subject. I don't know what that is. I don't know what it is. I need to stay so focused, so help me out here, people. Oh, by the way, I'm in my pajamas. I just don't feel, it was when I get a migraine, I don't want anything constrictive on me, if you know what I mean. So I'm trying to get rid of it before my shift. So let's go back to when my brother was born. My mother got very lonely, being in Winchester on this 300-acre place that we owned. But during that time, my father was a little bit of a gambler, and he had his own chicken fighting rink in our barn. I remember raking it out. It was a circle thing, and there was a snack bar. I remember as a little girl, dead chickens piled up 10 foot high. I remember men standing around the circle with a wad of money. And I was just, I guess what, 4 or 5, no, I wasn't 4, I was about 5 or 6. But as time progressed and I started developing, my mother would not let me do that anymore, thank goodness. Okay. Evidently she was more aware of the evil in the world, but she never told us about evil. We had a fairy tale childhood. We were poor, but we didn't know we were poor. That's the best kind of poor. We weren't Dolly Parton poor, but we lived very simply. And when we got hungry, we went out in the yard and chopped the chicken's head off, or I didn't, my mother did. So yeah, so my mother was isolated a lot because my father would do ceramic tile work in Northern Virginia and go to Winchester on the weekends. So after my brother was born, my mother, this was a big thing in our family. My mother said, I want to be with you, my dad, in Northern Virginia. So we rented a little house in Oakton. And right next door to where our house was called the Zook store. And that is where my father had 20-some employees. Now, this was in the late 60s. And I remember my mother having like the first electric typewriter. It was a Selectric. And I remember listening to her, and I would go and play on it. But they had their own office next to, I think it was Clegg's Welding right there, like maybe 2 blocks from Oakton Elementary in Oakton, Virginia. I remember my mother and father were like big wheels. They had a fleet of trucks with my brothers. They named the tile company after my brother. And I remember my mother had a dispensary for soup. I thought that was just crazy, and I just loved like getting the onion soup. You'd put some money in there and you'd get the soup. And my sister and I would walk to school. This is before the child abuse and the kidnapping was, like it is now. Now you should never let your children walk out of the house, probably. So then we moved down to Hunter Mill Road, off Vale Road, and that is now, millionaires live there now, but when we lived there, it was just, you know, just a regular old neighborhood. But then once we, let's see, then we went, where did we go then? Yeah, we rented a house on Guinea Road too, and then my father burnt the kitchen down, and we were renting it, and they made us move out. But I think my mother still owned the house on Vale Road. I think we moved back in there. I'm not sure. And then we moved to Oakton Road, and a little teeny house. I remember I was so embarrassed at our little house because it looked really small from the front, but it was really long. And my father took the garage and turned it into 2 bedrooms for me and my sister. And during this time, my sister became very, very religious, and we would go to church 3 times a week. We would walk to church. I was down Fellowship Baptist Road. And that's where I became, I guess, very close to God then. I do think that religion is a very private thing. That's when I also realized that a lot of these Christians use their religion to trick people. I realized, that's when I realized most of them were hypocrites. They lived a secret life. They were really evil people. And my mother had a tendency to use religion whenever it was convenient for her, if you know what I mean. My mother was very, very strict. She wanted to know where we were at all times. I can remember my bedroom was like the meeting place for everybody on that street, and also Spruce Street and a couple other streets. Everybody met at my bedroom window, I guess because I was in a centralized location. But I never let anybody in my bedroom, if you know what I mean. No, my mother would have whipped me. She would have whipped me really bad. So, yeah, this used to irk my sister. I don't know, but my sister was very, very sick. I think she had diabetes all through high school, because when I would come home from high school, she would be in her bed throwing up with a very, very bad migraine. She was so sickly. Now, then when I was in high school, all I thought about was getting my own car. I was making $1.61 at Gino's at Fairfax Circle, and I went and put a deposit on it, Jim McKay Chevrolet, on this big old lead sled Impala. And then when I went back the next day, they sold it. And so then I had to pick out another car. So then I picked out a 66 Mustang convertible. So that's all I thought about, was getting my own car. Now, I was one of the first persons in high school to get their own driver's license, because I didn't. Back then, you had to wait till summer school, then you had to take driver's ed, and then you had to be on a list, and sometimes you'd be the last one on the list. And because my last name ended in a M, I didn't want to, I wanted to enjoy that summer. So I took my paycheck from this hamburger joint and paid for my driver's ed, $60. I remember that was so much money back then. And I had my license before everybody else. And I bought my own car. And when I got out of school at noon, I would go to my job at Fairfax Fire and Rescue. And then I would go to another hamburger joint after I got off there at 4:30 at the Massey building, and go into my other job. And during this time, I got emancipated. I was one of the, I think, very first persons in Fairfax to get emancipated, because my mother was just, sometimes she was just intolerable. But now I realized I wish I'd listened to her, because she was right about everything. But when you're 16, you don't know jack shit. So just before I got emancipated, I went on this blind date, And I remember the first thing I said to him, he was living in Dixie Hills. I said, don't think you're going to get anything off of me because you aren't. Well, I ended up falling in love with him because he treated me with respect. He didn't go back to high school and said, oh, I did her last night. You know, he was just very attentive, very loving. We had a great sex life during high school. I know I got lucky more than anybody in high school. But, yeah, we used to melt the lockers. My teachers used to get really upset at us because we would just make out in between classes. And a lot of people said we would melt the lockers. Now, yeah, so then I got married to him 2 days after I turned 18 and moved to a trailer park in Chantilly. And, I just love this guy. The minute we got married, he was never the same. I didn't know who he was. He was missing the first weekend of our marriage. It broke my heart, and I knew then I was in there for the long haul because I was pregnant with my daughter, and I was very, very sick. It's one reason why I didn't do anything about what he was doing, because I was too sick to do anything. I was throwing up 3 times a day, and my mother, I couldn't even graduate with my class. My mother was so upset about this. She signed me up for summer school at Robinson High School, and my sister, who's no longer here, she would drive all the way to Chantilly, take me to Robinson High School. This was where they held the summer school. I did not I didn't go to Robinson. They were just holding summer school at Robinson. So I remember I lost 25 pounds. I was so skinny. I had sticks, and I remember going across the stage from summer school to get my diploma. I have a picture of me, and I had no fat on my legs at all because I could not eat for 3 months. So I couldn't do anything about what my husband was doing because I was just so sick, and then I had to, get my diploma. And then I went to work for Fairfax County Police, and then I got pregnant with my son. Now, what was strange during this time is that my husband's parents never came to our wedding. I was just so thrilled to be with somebody that I loved that I didn't even care. But now when I look back in retrospect, I should have cared. I should have told them off. They came up with all these excuses. Well, didn't have anything to wear. Bull crap. They just didn't want their son to get married. But, yeah. And then when I got pregnant, my husband did not want me to tell even his parents, which I thought now is really weird. It really upset me. Yeah, it was really just strange. So I've gone almost into 12 minutes. I will finish this to part 2. There'll probably be about 6 parts to this. So I hope you've enjoyed the part 1. Haven't bored you too much. All right. Bye, everyone. I just took a little break. I did leave out the part that when my parents' company became very successful, we had maids. They were black maids, and I became very, very close to them. I was so close to them, I adored them because they would give me attention that I would sleep with them. I remember my mother gave them a fold-out couch, and I would sleep with them. And every night I would go to the Zook store. I'd get a Dr. Pepper and barbecued potato chips, and I would buy her some. But that's when I first saw my, a black person, because I had a very insulated, sheltered life up until then. And that's when I loved them all. I know all their names to this day. Yeah. So my mother was so busy with the company that she didn't have that time that she should have had with us. She was trying to build the business, and she was very good at it. But keeping my father under, certain reins of hers was very difficult. But yeah, so we did have maids growing up, and I learned to love them all. And I helped raise my sisters and brother. And as time went on, I would help raise, of course, my own children and some of my nieces and nephews. And then when I became a grandmother, I helped raise my own grandchildren. So I think we left off this story where I had gotten married and, you know, I'd already bought my own car. Now, just before I met my husband, I was in a very bad accident and was in the hospital during the summer, and that's where I pretty much met him. I called him, and I remember the exact moment I fell in love with him. We had gone on a blind date, and I had not been attracted to him at that moment. But then when I was in the hospital going through, I called every one of my boyfriends, said, I'm in the hospital, come and visit me, because I was there for a long time. And I remember when he came to visit me, he had brand new shoes on and he had a brand new car. And I looked out the window, it was a 71 Red Nova. And he was on his way. He didn't tell me this till after I've been married for years, that he was on his way to a blind date with a girl at Fairfax Theater, and he said that she had the worst breath, but he had brand new shoes on. I looked out the window, he had a brand new car, so I knew he was just turning 17, or I guess. I knew then that he was he was grounded and he had no trouble making money and he was reliable. But when I looked out the window and I saw that beautiful red car, I mean, my heart just, because I was just a crazy car girl. I mean, I was racing cars at Old Dominion Speedway. I was racing my own 66 Mustang. I was in double M bracket and everything was stock. I had bought my own Kragers, I got my own Holly 4-barrel. I had hijackers. I had Mickey Thompsons, and I bought all this making $1.61 an hour. So, and as I said, I got pregnant and didn't get to graduate with my class. So, and then I thought it was weird that my husband didn't tell his parents that I was even pregnant. But once the baby was born, I guess they didn't get close to my children until I guess they were like 2 or 3. But during this time, my husband's parents divorced. It was really, really nasty divorce. So then, I quit my job at the police department. I'd gotten a job there, worked there for 2 years. I worked with 70 police officers. They were so good to me. They bought me everything I needed for the baby. So then we moved to the Northern Neck because my parents retired in the Northern Neck, which is Heathsville. And we would go down there on the weekends and visit, and I just loved it. I loved that. There was no traffic. It was a whole different world. And I wanted to move closer to my parents, and I'm glad I did, because it was a wonderful place to raise children. Hardly no crime at all. And we bought this little teeny house, and my children started school. And I got a job at Saluda as a deputy sheriff, and I had to drive 45 minutes one way. Remember, we had to cross over the Whitestone Bridge. A lot of people were committing suicide on this bridge. A lot of people were going off the bridge. They didn't mean to go off the bridge. So my headache's getting a little bit worse, so I'm going to stop this again. All right, people, bye.